We have a lot to cover in today's episode, from Trump attacking the Houthis for attacking our ships going through the Red Sea, to an environmental group getting sued for $660 million. We're going to be covering all of these things. I'm your host, Dimitri, and without further ado, let's begin. The Federal Reserve keeps rates the exact same. As everybody knows, the economy is not the best, okay? And inflation has gone out of hand. This is because of the fact that we had record spending because of a certain illness that we cannot say because it will be flagged down below, and it continued at record levels under Joe Biden. The Federal Reserve under Biden was told time and time again to lower rates to make the economy look even better than it actually was. And even though the answer was to higher the interest rates, which would in turn make people spend less money, help the economy in the longer run, they instead opted for short-term gain, and they would still lower the rates to make Joey B feel good again. The economy would look better. The stock market would be blooming. Fast forward to this year under President Trump, everybody in the Federal Reserve wanted to actually help the economy, and they don't need to lie to anybody. So they decided to keep the rates the exact same. This ultimately wouldn't be my plan if I was in the Federal Reserve. I instead would opt for a higher interest rate just to be 100% sure that we will not see a recession, and we will have an absolute zero chance of this very thing happening. That is ultimately a good thing because it's a step in the right direction. According to Perplexity, the Federal Reserve is anticipating core inflation to rise from 2.5% to 2.7% by year end, above their previous prediction. This suggests that holding rates steady may not be sufficient to control inflation fully, which is exactly what I'm saying. They should raise it the next time that they meet in May. A bad economy can make or break a president. Even while President Trump has plenty of other achievements, people do not care about that. While economic policies and interest rates continue to stir debate, another issue demanding attention is the persistent threats against President Trump, with a recent arrest highlighting the ongoing security challenge he faces. Somebody threatened Trump on TikTok and they got arrested. As everybody knows, President Trump has gotten countless threats on his life. According to public records, Trump faces around 6 to 8 threats a day, which is about the same amount as past presidents. But the only difference is that the past presidents only had to go through this with it being said online, not actually doing it. There's so many different things that we can talk about, like the assassination attempts in his life, which we're going to get to a little bit later. But focusing on this one incident for a second, Florida man named Kendrell Aaron Todd thought that it was going to be a good idea to record an 80-second TikTok where he says, and I quote, "Fight me naked till you," which is, why naked? About whatever. He continues, quote, "I'm going to cut you up with a chainsaw and put you in acid." That's very weird. That's not a nice thing to do or say. Go off, I guess. He was arrested by the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office in the United States Secret Service, who executed a search warrant at Todd's residence. And a few years prior to this, another person named Cesar Sayoc in 2018 got involved in actual attempts to harm Trump via mailed explosives. Sayoc was convicted of domestic terrorism and sentenced to 20 years in prison. That brings us to January of this year, when a person who lives close to Mar-a-Lago named Shannon Depreya Atkins made online threats against Trump but did not take any physical steps toward carrying out these threats. He was otherwise arrested after being found with drugs during a traffic stop, which doesn't make any sense to me, because why do you think that you can get away with this? Like, do you not think that they have security or something? While threats against public figures like Trump highlight the challenges of security in the digital age, another pressing issue emerges with the deportation of a university professor, raising questions about immigration, national security, and the boundaries of free expression. University professor is deported. Let's break it down. We have been hearing a lot of stories about how we're supposed to feel bad where a person that is here on a green card is deported after getting themselves tangled up with terrorist organizations, like everybody does. We talked about one case last week, like Mohammed Khalil. He organized protests and locked himself inside of university buildings instead of going to public universities to actually learn, which is the exact focus here and exactly the reason why he's actually in America to begin with. But whatever. If he would have said that he was going to organize protests and lock himself inside of university buildings on the green card application, then he would have got declined. But focusing on this for a second, this professor's name is Dr. Rusha Aliwa. The assistant professor in question has been in the United States since 2018, completing fellowships at Ohio State University, the University of Washington, and Yale University, before joining Brown University, which was the university where she worked at before she got deported. She held a valid H-1B visa issued on March 11, 2025 for her role as an assistant professor and clinician educator. Despite its validity, her visa was canceled after authorities deemed her inadmissible due to alleged ties to Hezbollah and her allegedly going to one of the terrorist group members' funerals, which is just bad, illustrating that even a valid H-1B visa can be revoked. But what led to this incident? Well, on March 13, 2025, Alua was detained at Boston Logan International Airport, which is my airport, hello. Upon returning from a trip to Lebanon, United States Customs and Border Protection ZBP officers inspected her phone and discovered sympathetic photos and videos of prominent Hezbollah figures, including Hassan, I can't pronounce his last name, the former leader of Hezbollah, who was killed in a targeted strike by the United States, and Iran's supreme leader. During interrogation, Alawam admitted to attending leader's funeral on February 23, 2025 in Lebanon. She also acknowledged following the leader's teachings from a religious perspective, quote unquote, but denied political or military support for Hezbollah. But you're going to the guy's funeral, so it doesn't make any sort of sense. The story's not really lining up. However, authorities agreed with me and deemed her actions and materials as promoting extremist ideologies, rendering her inadmissible under the United States immigration law, which is within the rights of the United States because we cannot have an assistant professor teaching kids to look at terrorist leaders sympathetically. While national security concerns drive discussions like deportation of a professor with alleged terrorist ties, President Trump is at the same exact time pushing forward with his domestic agenda, including his persistent efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. Is President Trump finally going to get rid of the Department of Education? It feels like every single day that we're talking about President Trump trying to get rid of the Department of Education, but what exactly has Trump been doing? Well, I'll tell you. This is a timeline. February 2025, Institute of Education scientists gutted, grants canceled. March 3rd, 2025, Linda McCon confirmed as Education Secretary. March 6, 2025, executive order draft expected to be signed as early as this date, status unclear by March 19. Early March 2025, workforce cuts announced and begun, ongoing by March 19. March 12, 2025, Trump's news conference reinforcing the narrative against the department on March 19, 2025, which is exactly when I wrote this script, with workforce cuts and narrative push still active. Here's the trick. If we do not get this to go to the House, there's absolutely 0% chance of the Department of Education getting fully taken out, and that is because it was first introduced by Congress in 1979. The most he can possibly do within his power is propose a budget with massive cuts to signal intent, enforce congressional debate, appoint a secretary hostile to department's traditional role, which he exactly did, who could slow operations and redirect priorities, example towards school choice. Instead, issue executive orders and regulatory rollbacks to reduce federal oversight and shift responsibilities to states or other agencies, cut staff and discriminatory programs to hobble day-to-day operations, amplify public calls for abolition to build momentum for legislative support. After all these things are done first, then it must pass both House and the Senate, which, if you look at the chances, based on the current stance of the Congress, with its slim Republican majorities and the need for a supermajority in the Senate, coupled with the historic and ongoing operation, it is highly unlikely that President Trump's request to abolish the Department of Education would pass in 2025. The political and practical implications, including the department's role in federal education, further reinforce this assessment. While President Trump faces domestic challenges in his push to dismantle the Department of Education, international tensions are heating up, with Israel's latest actions against Hamas sparking yet another wave of global controversy. Israel protects itself against Hamas, and the world feels bad for, drumroll please, Hamas. For the past week or so, Israel, Hamas, the United States, the United Nations, and a couple of other world leaders have tried to get together to try to reach some sort of deal to end the war between Hamas in Gaza and Netanyahu in Israel. Everyone had their demands, like Israel requesting Hamas leaders to make sure that they just do not try to break into the country again and commit another tragedy. Of course, Hamas, being a terrorist group that they are, had one small, little, tiny favor, and that would be for Israel to completely remove all military from the Gaza Strip and just trust Hamas again, which is looked at like Hamas trying to not come to the table and negotiate, because what the heck is that? After everybody in their right mind said absolutely not, no, never, then Hamas just left the table and started talking about how they're going to plan another attack on Israel, which is another October 7th. So Israel did what any other country would do, and they targeted the top leaders of Hamas and sent them to meet their creator. Of course, just like every other time Israel defends itself, the world tries to attack Israel for it. And it just doesn't make any sense, knowing especially if Ukraine were to do this to Russia, it would be celebrated on CNN and MSNBC. While Israelis' defense actions against Hamas continue to stir international debate, back home, President Trump is taking bold steps on a different front, signing the Advanced Energy Technologies Clause to tackle climate concerns with a practical twist. Trump signs the Advanced Energy Technologies Clause. Let's break it down. The Trump administration is not ignoring the red sirens, as some people on MSNBC and CNN would like to say about the climate. Trump signed an international agreement on March 19, 2025, aimed at enhancing clean energy trade. This move counters tariff threats by reducing trade barriers on clean energy technologies, such as solar panels, wind turbines, and energy storage systems. His goal is to make these technologies more affordable and accessible globally, aligning with environmental objectives to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. My answer is always to just go nuclear. It's so easy and clean, but we should start with a small modular reactors, also known as SMRs. They are smaller, more flexible nuclear plants, gaining attention for their potential in a low carbon future. Will this make a difference in the climate? Well, yes. By lowering tariffs, the agreement makes renewable technologies like solar, wind, and batteries cheaper. This could accelerate their adoption worldwide, especially in countries where the cost has been a barrier. Increased deployment of renewables and energy storage can displace fossil fuels-based power generation, reducing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions. For example, replacing coal plants with solar or wind farms directly cuts emissions, if it is done properly, I should say. Okay, that is a huge caveat, because Joe Biden was at an old shut-down energy production company my grandfather actually used to work at, but still, years later, there's absolutely no wind farms there. There's zero solar panels there either. Doesn't really make any sense. This is exactly why I hope that Trump's Advanced Energy Technologies Clause aims to actually do what it says and secure a cleaner future through innovative trade policies. His administration is also tackling pressing global security challenges like the Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea that threaten economic stability and inflation worldwide. The Houthis in Yemen attacked ships with American products, causing inflation to rise. This all started at the Bab al-Mandab Strait, which is a critical passage for the ships traveling between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea via the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. Since late 2023, the Houthis have escalated attacks on commercial and military vessels in the area, using drones, missiles, and the sea mines, often claiming to target ships linked to Israel, the United States, or their allies, in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza. These attacks have forced many shipping companies to avoid the Red Sea entirely, rerouting around the Horn of Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. This detour adds significant time and cost, sometimes up to 2 weeks and millions of dollars per trip, bypassing the Suez Canal, which normally handles about 12 to 15% of global trade and 30% of container shipping. JP Morgan research estimates that these disruptions could add about 0.7 percentage points to global core goods inflation and 0.3 percent points to overall core inflation during the first half of 2024. If we can look at the calendar together, 2023 was under Joe Biden's presidency, and if we go back in time, we can look what Uncle Joe Biden actually did, and it was absolutely nothing, zero result. America just stood there like a deer in the headlights, but under President Trump, the Houthis are waking up to reality. President Trump gave the Houthis a rude awakening, primarily conducted by the United States and the United Kingdom, with support from other allies like Australia, Canada, and the Netherlands. This awakening began in January 2024. These operations, often under names like the Operation Polston Anchor, or the Operation Prosperity Guardian, aimed to degrade Houthi military capabilities, missile launchers, drones, radar systems, and weapon shortages facilities. So these missiles went straight to those places. The goal was to stop the Houthis from disrupting maritime traffic, especially through at the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a vital checkpoint for global trade heading to and from the Suez Canal. So did it work, you ask? So far, the strikes have had a mixed result. On one end, they destroyed significant Houthi assets. Hundreds of millions of dollars of drones and other equipment have been taken out in dozens in precision strikes. For instance, the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, reported multiple operations hitting targets like the underground bunkers in command centers in Sana'a and coastal areas. These efforts have likely reduced the Houthis' immediate capacity to launch complex attacks, with some estimates suggesting a notable depletion of their weapon stack. The strikes haven't fully stopped the Houthis from bothering ships. The group has continued its campaign, launching over 130 attacks on shipping since October 2023, with incidents persisting into 2025, including sinking 2 vessels and seizing 1. The Galaxy Leader, a Bahamian-flagged car carrier, hijacked on November 19, 2023. Houthi shipping attacks, patterns, and exceptions for 2025. Reports consistently indicate that the Galaxy Leader had no cargo at the time of seizure, as it was en route to India without vehicles on board. They've adapted by using cheaper, more expendable tools like unmanned surface vessels and shipping tactics to maintain pressure despite losses. A notable uptick occurred in March 2025 when the Houthis resumed attacks on Israeli-linked vessels after a brief lull tied to a Gaza ceasefire, showing their resolve remains intact. Shipping companies report ongoing disruptions, with many still rerouting around Africa to avoid the Red Sea entirely, cutting Suez Canal traffic by over 50% compared to pre-conflict levels. As the Houthi attacks in Yemen drive up inflation and disrupt global trade under Trump's watch, back in the United States, a different storm brews with an indictment of Cori Bush's husband on federal fraud charges, spotlighting domestic accountability. Cori Bush's husband was indicted on federal charges. Cori Bush, for those of you that do not know, is a former United States representative for Missouri's 1st Congressional District, which includes St. Louis and parts of northern St. Louis County. She held office from 2021 to 2025 before her political career, and she was active in the Black Lives Matter movement, which is just awesome if I do say so myself. She is part of the Progressive Squad in Congress, known for advocating social justice and economic equality, also known as DEI, or as I like to say, DIE. Anyways, Courtney Merritt's, Cori Bush's husband, has been charged with 2 counts of wire fraud. The charges stem from allegations that he submitted false applications to obtain over $20,000 in COVID relief funds through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, EIDL, and Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. Between 2020 and 2021, authorities claim that he used these funds for personal benefit rather than the businesses listed in the application. An unexpected detail is that Merritt intends to plead not guilty, as stated by his attorney, adding a layer of legal complexity to the case. This is according to the Daily Wire, which also adds that the indictment announced by the United States Attorney Ed Martin Jr., alongside officials from the SBA Office of Inspector General and the FBI Washington Field Office, specifies that Merritt received an $8,500 EIDL loan on January 7, 2022, and additional funds through PPP, with the total amount forgiven based on his alleged fraudulent statements. According to St. Louis Post-Dispatch, this forgiveness included a PPP loan of $20,832 and $254.03 in interest, highlighting the financial impact of the alleged fraud. Merritt's attorney, Justin Goland, responded by stating that Merritt intends to plead not guilty, emphasizing that the indictment represents only the government's version of the events and that they look forward to litigating the case in the federal court in Washington, D.C. I will update you guys as soon as I hear anything. While domestic legal battles like the indictment of Cori Bush's husband spotlight issues of accountability in the United States, on the international stage, a massive prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine highlights a rare moment of cooperation amid ongoing conflict. Russia and Ukraine exchanged 175 prisoners of war. On March 19, 2025, Russia and Ukraine executed a significant prisoner exchange, swapping 175 prisoners of war each, with Russia additionally releasing 22 severely wounded Ukrainian prisoners. This event, facilitated by the United Arab Emirates, marks one of the largest exchanges since the onset of the conflict and underscores ongoing humanitarian efforts amid the ongoing war. The exchange's timing, following a phone call between the United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on March 18, 2025, suggests possible diplomatic influences. The exchange involved a one-on-one swap of 175 prisoners from each side, totaling 350 individuals, with an additional 22 Ukrainian prisoners released by Russia due to their severe medical conditions. The event occurred near the northern border of the two nations, a common location for such swap. Reports indicate that the prisoners included Ukrainian servicemen who have defended the key areas like all of these, which I cannot pronounce, highlighting strategic importance of these captured. The United Arab Emirates played a critical role in mediating the exchange, a role it has taken in previous swaps, reflecting its growing influence in facilitating dialogue between the two nations. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky announced that the exchange on March 19, describing it as, quote, one of the largest, and emphasizing the return of the soldiers, surgeons, and officers, stating, Ukraine remembers every one of our heroes. We will bring all of our people home. Reports indicate significant challenges faced by prisoners during captivity. The AP News notes allegations of medical neglect, mistreatment, and torture of Ukrainian POWs, which are prisoners of war, by Russian forces, which release prisoners requiring immediate medical and psychological assistance. This is according to the AP News. A United Nations Human Rights Council report from October 2024 detailed that 50% of Russian POWs interviewed since March 2023 reported severe beatings, death threats, and physical violence during initial captivity by Ukrainian forces. Though conditions improved in official detention centers, this is according to Relaf Web, these findings underscore the humanitarian imperative of such exchanges and the need for compliance in the international standards, such as the Geneva Convention, which is a complete joke because they do not even step in whatsoever. While the Russia and Ukraine prisoner exchange showcases a rare diplomatic breakthrough in a war-torn region across the Atlantic, a hefty legal verdict against Greenpeace in favor of the energy transfer underscores the accelerating battles between corporate interests and environmental activism. Greenpeace, which is an environmental group, has to pay $660 million. Let's break it down. On March 19, 2025, a North Dakota jury found Greenpeace liable for defamation and other claims, ordering them to pay over $660 million in damages to Energy Transfer, the operator of Dakota's Access Pipeline, DAPL. The exact amount reported varies slightly, with some sources like the Washington Post citing $667 million, while others, including Greenpeace's statement and North Dakota's Monitor, report over $660 million. So it looks like the Washington Post has a typo. This discrepancy may stem from rounding or inclusion of additional punitive damages, with reports indicating over $400 million in punitive damages alone. As noted by Reuters, the lawsuit, initially filed in the federal court in 2017 and refined in state court in 2019, stemmed from protests against DAPL near the Standing Rock Salt Reservation from 2016 to 2017. Energy Transfer accused Greenpeace of orchestrating a scheme to stop pipeline construction, including paying protesters, organizing training, and making defamatory statements that harmed the company's reputation and financial relationship. The defamation claims specifically targeted statements made by Greenpeace, which Energy Transfer argues were false and damaging. According to the Washington Post, the case hinged on 9 statements accusing Energy Transfer of using aggressive tactics against protesters and desecrating burial grounds. Greenpeace, in their defense, maintains these statements were not unique to them and were often echoes of claims by other adversary groups or Standing Rock Salt leaders. As detailed in their article, 6 Reasons Why Energy Transfer's Lawsuit Against Greenpeace is Outrageous. This is made by Greenpeace, so which is just a conflict of interest, but I'll just put that out there. They argued these statements addressed matters of public importance and were made in solidarity with indigenous protests, with some statements taken from letters signed by over 500 organizations. These damages awarded included both compensatory and punitive components. Reuters noted that the verdict included over $400 million in punitive damages included to punish Greenpeace for their conduct, with total likely comprising additional compensationary damages for financial losses estimated between $265 million and $340 million. As mentioned in the BBC News, during closing arguments, the exact breakdown was not fully detailed in all of the reports, but Greenpeace USA was ordered to pay $400 million as per North Dakota Monitor, with liabilities also extending to Greenpeace International and Greenpeace Fund. Though specific amounts for these entities were not clarified, Greenpeace has vowed to appeal this verdict, with plans to take this case to the North Dakota Supreme Court, as stated in their verdict on Greenpeace.org. They also indicated a lawsuit in a Dutch court against Energy Transfer under the EU's anti-SLAPP directive in February 2024, seeking to recover damages and costs, with a court date mentioned for July 2025 in the Netherlands. Greenpeace's interim executive director, Sushma Raman, emphasized the case's threat to the First Amendment rights, calling it part of a corporate push to silence dissent. Greenpeace, which is just plain stupid because you lost in damaged property, so pay up, bud. That is going to do it for today's episode. If you did enjoy it, then consider subscribing, because we do post new episodes of the show every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you all for watching, thank you all for listening, and I hope they have a great rest of your day. Bye.